Welcome to Flame On. I am Brian. I am your host for this little comics conversation today. I am joined by the fabulous comic cartoonist creator extraordinaire, Mayday Trippe. How are you, Mayday?
Hey Brian, I'm good.
It is a pleasure talking to you again. For those of you who do not also listen to Comic Book Bears, and you really should, and watch because we do them on Thursday nights these days. Uh, we did an interview with Comic Book Bears. Oh gosh, it was about a month ago, I think,
hmm
thereabouts. It was around your birthday, from what I recall.
That's right.
That was so cool. This is going to be a companion piece to that. So if you've already listened to that, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the same stuff, specifically and mostly about your exciting new Patreon project that's come. That's not even coming out. It's in the process of coming out, which is so cool. But also, I would refer back to that conversation as well. They're both great; they should work together well. But welcome, and so let's dig right into it. Patreon. I don't remember if we talked about this specifically, but what what led you to Patreon in terms of releasing comics? Like what about the Patreon model did you get excited about in terms of that for your project with Hallows?
I was looking for a way to release this digitally that felt different than things I'd already tried. Like I've done digital web comics, I've done digital $1 PDFs. Um, I was interested in Patreon because it's something I hadn't done before, and the idea of doing a web comic that I could share like a preview out to all my social media feeds, but the new strip would just be for people who had subscribed to the Patreon. That exclusivity seemed interesting to me, and I wanted to try it.
So I full disclosure, I am a Patreon patron. It's just patron,
Yeah.
and I love getting to see a comic come together in real time. This is not something I am used to. It is not something you can do in the modern, maybe a little bit more with the digital era because a lot of artists and creators will post pages and various things. But seeing your pencils, seeing your whole process really laid bare is really fascinating.
Thanks. Yeah, that's one of there's an incentive on Patreon to provide kind of behind the scenes stuff because you want to make people who have subscribed to you feel like they have an exclusive access that you wouldn't normally get if you just bought a comic. Um, and I've been trying to show stuff that's not spoilery, you know, but it's difficult to try and pick what to show that you're working on and what to reveal. But at the same time, like it's just fun. It's fun to get feedback on character sketches or a particular panel layout that somebody will like or comment. This looks so cool before it's even out as a comic.
Well, so that's actually interesting. So, do you find that that influences your decisions, or is that sort of that feedback? You wall that off, and you're like, well, that's great, but I'm still doing what I'm doing.
I don't know. It probably does in ways that I'm not aware of, but it definitely encourages me. And the encouragement is the number one thing you need when you're making something. And one of the difficult parts of making like a long form graphic novel is not getting feedback, that positive reinforcement of you're doing something cool, while you're working on it. And this format is kind of allowing me to tell this, 80 to 100 page story in a way that gives me that constant perpetual feedback that fans are enjoying it.
Well, from what I can see in the community, and I should do a better job of giving you feedback as well because I'm seeing it. Uh, it's really cool. It's okay. So I'm gonna do a little screen share stuff. I try not to abuse my powers here, but I think that uh, this image of moonshine is so iconic, and it really says a lot in just this one picture because as I'm, we're up to like page 8, I think, in the
hmm
Hallows. So Moonshine represents. I mean, they're the protagonists. I think that's fair
Right.
to say. Uh, there's so much in this one image in terms of the symbology, the sort of otherworldliness to them, with the three eyes and sort of the obviously the superhero flames, and all that. But uh, it tells a lot about the story, and so far in the first 8 pages, it's going. You drop right in, which I also appreciate because you don't want to front load and lose people, right?
Right.
But you're building the world in little chunks that sort of that make you ask more questions, and I love that. I love stories that draw you in and don't just like go, here's the whole thing now absorb. Like
Right.
it's just a better path. And the other thing, oh yeah, so actually, before I ramble and go too far down this rabbit hole, our buddy James Figueredo, who I will get your name right one of these days, uh, I agree completely. Your art, Mayday, your art is just so beautiful.
Thanks so much.
Um,
Thanks,
but
James.
it's deceptive. It's deceptive because you have a cartoony style that makes you feel like it's going to be fun. And it's not that it's not a fun. I'm sure there will be fun in the book, but it gets dark quick.
Yeah. We've got
So
some heavy stuff going on.
I mean, I was trying to give you all that to sort of lead up to like, how do you find that balance between your art style, which can be a little more, and I'm going to say Steven Universe as a placeholder for a little more cartoony,
Sure.
with the darker material. Like, how do you balance those two?
Well, I mostly try to think of my art style as a scaffolding that lets you deal with darker things because you're safe. My style is very inviting, I think, and has a lot of kind of ambient emotional texture where you feel safe with it. Whereas some of the subject matter can be a little heavier. It's why I think like my book Something Terrible worked well for people that normally wouldn't deal with such a heavy subject matter as that did. So with Hallows, we're following a less stressful story than that, but still with some heavy elements. And I don't know. I hope that the kind of lightness of the style allows you to have fun while we're in this dark and scary universe. Because Moonshine's not a dark and scary character. Mm-hmm. They're fairly positive about trying to fight these monsters and things, and even though they're driven by some vengeance,
Well, I think that's what struck me is there's a comment they make about I want to cut their head off.
Well, I think Moonshine's sword said that.
Oh, is it this? Oh, okay. That's better. You're probably right. I might be misremembering.
He's a little more bloodthirsty.
Is that Scale?
Yeah, Scale is his dragon that's like a pet sword.
Okay, which I also love. I love that playfulness. But yeah. So that definitely helps. So you want your main character to have a drive, but maybe not a bloodlust. But at the same time, what they're talking about in this panel, I mean, I don't want to spoil too much, but there are these police that are, first of all, rendered not unlike Nazis. I think that's a deliberate choice.
Right.
And they're basically trying to summon this goody good, who is I believe, a witch that was killed or sacrificed, whatever, in Salem. And they're trying to bring her spirit back in a not a benevolent way.
No.
Am I misremembering this?
No, you're dead on. And okay. It's Goody Good is kind of she's what's called a blood witch, which is a type of magical being that has a connection to blood specifically. And if you'll notice in the picture that we finally got to see of her in the newest strip, she's got the same 3 eyes that Moonshine has. So what does that make you think Moonshine is? So there's this thing that we're building towards about the mythology of what are all these magical beings, that we've dealt with and have informed our myths and mythologies throughout, human history.
Now, we talk about this in the other interview, and I think we should touch on it here. But you do an interesting job of building mythology with these other pieces, like we already mentioned. The Salem witches, the sword kind of thing. I don't know. Is there a mythological component from the sword that you're drawing on, or is that just your own? The
sword. There's going to be a thing about swords and serpents. So there's some mythology to the different times we've seen dragons in human history and what that means. And But I don't want to go too much into it now because that's like a sequel story.
No. That's save it for the story. But you also in previous conversation we talked about you're going to bring in vampires in a certain form. You're going to bring in werewolves in a certain form. You're gonna knit those mythologies together in a way that is really kind of a neat glue for pretty much like all magical beings, and it touches on heaven and hell and the Grim Reaper, and like I know some people like don't like having everything fit together for their stories. I love it. I'm all
well. If I
about
was
it.
if I was in the Marvel universe, I'd be trying to carve out like a little section just for Moonshine and the things they deal with. But I'm creating my own universe, So if I get to tell the mythology of this world, for me it's interesting to see, well, if I want to have vampires, how do they relate to werewolves? And if I want to have werewolves, how does that relate to zombies? And if I want to have zombies, how does that relate to witches? And it all kind of connects together, so where there's a unified monster theory.
The unified theory of I love that.
Right.
Physics hasn't gotten there yet, but they'll get there eventually. When they get the regular unified theory, then they can branch off. So there's a whole rich world of other characters that we've only touched on. There's a family component, I believe, with Caleb Nix, who is I think Caleb's uncle. No, Caleb Nix. Sorry,
Heath's uncle.
Heath's uncle.
Yeah.
And Heath is Moonshine, correct?
No. Heath is our main antagonist, but we haven't gotten to. Moonshine's name is Jesse when he was alive, and then we've got Jesse and his adopted or his foster brother Akim, and then their neighbor Ever, and Ever's friend Izzy. So we've got like a handful of like normal people, and that are at the heart of Moonshine's origin story that we're gonna start getting glimpses of.
I do also know. I know you touch on religion in this comic, and specifically, there's a pastor who plays a role and kind of like gives these sermons that sort of help, influence and sort of stage the story a bit. I haven't seen so they have not shown up yet in the comic,
Right.
but from your descriptions and something you shared with me, like it sounds like there's going to be that component of faith, which is something I know that both of us have a pretty good background in.
Right, growing up in the church.
So I'm very excited for that. We were talking before we started recording, and just talking about religion and our faith and the backgrounds that we both have with the church. It informs so much of our adult life, even if we've left it and kind of walked away.
Well, and it's funny, our conversation last time on Comic Book Bears actually influenced a story beat around some of the later pages of this first arc. Because I don't remember which one of y'all asked if some normal people were going to start getting glimpses of this fantastical world, but it occurred to me that like Pastor Tommy is an interesting character to have that happen with, because his perceptions of things would relate back to what he knows. So he would see, if he saw Moonshine, he would think it was an angel. So we're going to have some stuff with him dealing with what he perceives as happening.
It's an interesting road, because this reminds me of a thing I was reading the other day. It was actually a Facebook meme, going around, and it's like, what would the devil do to really like get into the world and spread his evil and all that? The obvious thing we think about in mythology is he comes in hot and heavy, tempts man. It's the whole thing. But really, one of the better vessels or vehicles, and it's kind of even touched on in the Bible, is the devil would co-opt Christianity. They would co-opt the church.
Right.
And so I am always interested in stories where that happens, because I believe it's happening now. I'm 100%. I think you and I both are on the same page here.
Hard to argue.
It's hard to argue with certain things happening in the world. So seeing somebody of faith go through that crucible of trying to really discern who is an angel and who is a demon, and getting it wrong, especially at first.
Right.
I mean, we've seen this in other stories. I feel like Buffy touched on this, or Angel at least. I mean, it's a great concept. It's really cool. And especially if you can show a person of faith who, maybe they screw up, but they kind of come around eventually and sort of figure out their path and how they relate.
Yeah, and Buffy
So
and Angel are definitely influences on the way I kind of have approached this story, wanting to have like real world teens and uh, manifest some like fantastical stuff dealing with them.
you also have in this piece some non-binary characters, and you yourself have come out in the last, well, gosh, now how long has it been? A few months at least.
Well, I changed my name in the last few months. I've been out about being non-binary for a few years,
Okay.
but it's just not that big of a. I mean, if you look male and you say I'm non-binary, people still use he/him pronouns, and I was still using he/him pronouns for a long time. A couple months ago, it finally hit me what I would change my name to, and I decided to change my name to Mayday, and I started using they/them pronouns like more exclusively. Um, and it's been great because when, like I was saying, like when you look like you were assigned male at birth, people just put you into the male category because they're so used to putting male female categories. If you're non-binary, there's nowhere to put you. But once I had my new name, which was something I didn't really think I would ever get to feel, because like I'm not trans. I mean, I'm non-binary is under the trans umbrella, but I'm not like fully trans. I'm just, not male. Right. So then once I had my new name, every time somebody uses it, it's such an affirmation that they see me as for who I really am. And so I really I recommend changing your name if you're gender nonconforming, because it
I think
gives you something to latch onto.
it's really very. I would say it's like you're charting a new path, or you're paving the way. But really, it's more visibility, because there's so many great non-binary, trans, queer. I always just use the umbrella term queer, and I know
Sure.
some people like that, some people don't. It's preference, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I see that community that we have, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm a gay man. I'm part of that. That is just learning to better express themselves, and being more brave in expressing themselves in a way that feels comfortable to them. And it's important for even like people in the community like myself, because even though I have a lot of dear trans friends, and now several, I can probably name at least 3 or 4 of my friends that are non-binary, I still need to see that representation to really understand it, and to keep it in my brain, because it's easy. It's easy. A lot of people are very traditional in a sense that they're used to the binary,
Yeah, and
and
I love the term non-binary just because so many things people, I think it's just a fact of living on Earth, where we're used to day and night and the sun and the moon, and we think of things in binary terms.
mhm.
But the sun and the moon are totally different astrological phenomena. They're not two sides of the same coin. They're totally different things. And there's more things besides those two things in the sky.
Well, one of the
So it's
things
nice. I love the term non-binary.
I like, this is a thing where I get into arguments, or I like having conversations about it, is because everybody assumes, and even I said traditional, but
Hmm.
really that's not traditional. Isn't It's always been this way. Traditional
That's a
is
good point.
it's we were raised this way,
Right.
and it's been like this maybe in American or in Western culture for a certain period of time. But if you go to other cultures,
Hmm.
specifically I'm thinking of the Indian Aboriginal American tribes, the Two Spirited
Sure.
people, this is not a new concept whatsoever.
No,
And
not
then
at all.
you look at biology, and there are many animals that have sort of gender fluidity, or
Hmm.
have this sort of non-binary condition. So it's like people just don't think about it, and they project their own backgrounds, and this is a human fallacy, right? Project their own binary on other people.
Well, and you're raised with it so strongly. I was working in a first grade class last year for as a parapro, and there's so many things that we think, oh, the progressive thing is to give the girls more of a shot. But really, what we're doing all the time is we're confirming gender binary. Okay, boys go do this, girls go do this. And this time the girls get to go first, this time the boys get to go first. There's so many binary things that if you're gender nonconforming, it's hard to even see if you exist. It's hard to perceive yourself as gender nonconforming because of the binary all around you. It wasn't
Yeah.
until I heard the term that I was like, oh, that's what you call me.
Well, and then again, that's even more reason why you being open and out about it and changing your name,
Yeah.
it reaffirms that for so many other people. Have you had any non-binary or queer individuals kind of reach out and say, thank you, oh my gosh, this is great, I needed this representation, I'm really glad to know you're out there? I mean, has that kind of been
I have, both from
awesome?
students and from parents of students who have kids with gender nonconforming identities, whether they're trans or non-binary. But I just teach this little program, after school digital art, which is shut down right now because of COVID. But I've had three of my students, and I just run this small program, but three of my students come out as trans, and you're just like, is gender nonconformity contagious?
Well, I think I told you the story that I had when I was in college, and I came out in my fraternity, and I was out for like a year or two, and then I started having people come out to me first, and then come out to the fraternity, and I was literally accused by some brothers of turning people gay, and I'm like, that's not a thing. That's just not a thing. That might be some weird fantasy that some people have, but that is just not what this is. So no, I think it's great and it's important, especially in the comics industry, because I mean there are definitely some fantastic queer and non-binary individuals, but I'll tell you, going to a con and having had the experience of had to like find individuals for a panel at like Heroes Con, it's challenging at times. It's not always easy. I'm bummed that we didn't have Heroes this year.
Oh man,
because
for sure.
I mean, we've talked about this too a lot. I would totally want to have a panel with you and sit here and have this conversation, because I feel like there's so many. Again, Heroes is a great show because it's a broad spectrum of humanity there. And it's
Heroes
nice
is so inclusive.
Oh, it's so inclusive, but it's inclusive in both the. There's a lot of queer and different creators there and individuals in comics, but also it's like families, a lot of families, and so I think that's important, that young kids who don't have great sources. I mean, they have more than they used to, right?
Yeah.
But this is important for them to have this experience and hear this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So maybe next year, I don't know. I'll reach out to our buddies at Heroes as soon as we start to have a good sense if we're going to do this. So I'm guessing, like, I mean, you went to Heroes. Did you do any other shows, or was that pretty much the big one you targeted?
This last couple of years, I've been doing Fluke and Heroes mainly.
Oh, okay.
I like Emerald City Con. I like getting up to NYCC every so often. I've done MegaCon in Orlando. And,
oh yeah.
My biggest year ever was right after Something Terrible came out digitally. I did 12 cons that year.
I remember, I think that was the first time I met you, is right around when Something Terrible was being released. I actually still have, and I told you this before, I have the giant poster I got from you with every character that you reference as totems, and then some, I think. So for those of people who don't know, and our listeners and our viewers, talk about Something Terrible in terms of a project, because that's another one that you crowdsourced, I believe, as well, right?
Something Terrible was a book that it's really a short comic. It's only about 14 pages long, but it's about some childhood abuse I suffered when I was a kid, child sexual abuse. And then how, when I was in 5th grade, my teacher put on the Batman movie, the 1989 Keaton movie. And I up until that point, I liked Batman as much as the next kid, but I didn't know why Batman was Batman. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know his origin story. And then in that movie, we see the flashbacks as Vicky Vale figures out who Bruce Wayne and Batman are. And it's this kid who's suffered this horrible tragedy and then rebuilds himself. And that became like a blueprint for me. I really saw myself in that idea of this horrible thing happening to you, but it giving you fuel to become something better, not to crumble and become something terrible. So I did this story about how much Batman meant to me growing up and as a father, and I called it Something Terrible because, Batman says he must become a creature of the night. Something's terrible to strike fear into the hearts of criminals.
I love that you have these heroes as totems, and I love that you draw support from them, because it's a very like Grant Morrison-y concept. I think around this time Grant Morrison was doing his super gods,
Yeah.
stuff, and I had never viewed comic books in that context. I always just thought, oh, they're fun. I like them. They're whatever. They're escapism. But truly, people do draw a lot of strength in their lives from comic books, and so I think that it's a great comic for so many reasons, and I'm glad it's out there. And I know it can be tough, especially for people who've suffered the abuse. But I think you really did it in a way that shows like a sense of hope and a way to like really deal with something terrible like that.
I appreciate you referencing Morrison. He's my favorite comic book writer. And there's one panel in Something Terrible where you see 3 comics laid on a desk with a Batman action figure near them. And it's JLA Earth 2, Flex Mentallo, and All-Star Superman #1. Because without those comics, I wouldn't have had the idea to write that story.
Really?
Yeah. It's all about alternate universes in my head. Like, what would happen if I called Batman to come save me? Because I know from Batman stories that he sometimes goes to other universes. So what happens if I write a story where Batman saved me when I'm a kid? And that's the story,
That's so interesting, and I never put it like I never connected those dots, and maybe we've talked about this and I've just forgotten, because that happens. But I love that. I love that idea, because Morrison really does have this metatextual idea of superheroes, that they're all in the same giant, like, it's in the Bleed, in the DC incarnation of it, where all these different parallel universes, the New 52 or whatever, like some of them are Marvel and some of them are this other one. And there's a DC universe. Was it? I forgot. It's like Earth 0 or Earth 1. That's
I don't remember.
Not Earth 1, but Earth something. Anyway, that's like our Earth. And there's this whole thing that it's there. And gosh, wouldn't it be nice? It's totally tangential, but I actually meant to mention this earlier. Do you play Fortnite? Have you played Fortnite?
I have played Fortnite, yeah.
So, Donald Mustard. Okay, this guy's got a great name, right? He sounds like a superhero villain or something. He was talking on one of the Marvel podcasts, because this season they're bringing all these Marvel characters. And he's actually building a metaverse with Marvel, DC, and now Ghostbusters, and then of course the Fortnite, characters that there's a ton of, and he's doing this thing that I can only think the last time I encountered something like this in like an outside of comics thing is, did you ever play that Lego Dimensions game?
Yes, that was like Something Terrible, the video game,
right? I mean,
like you'll be safe here all at once.
It was so epic to have Batman and the Doctor from Doctor Who, and all these characters mixed, and Lego movie characters. So Fortnite is doing that with this current season they're in, and
that's cool.
I take great and it gets better, because it's queer representation too. You can take any of these Marvel characters and do the best weird like queer dance emotes. And there's just so much fun interplay of taking like Cable. You can have a Cable character in there and running around with Batman, and then doing these rainbow dance moves, and
that's nice.
Like I love that. I just love that concept. So anyway, tangent aside, so Something Terrible is still available on a digital platform, or how would someone go about getting that still?
You can find it at Iron Circus Comics.
Iron Circus.
And I think there's still copies on Amazon of the hard copy.
Okay. I had a few friends ask me about that recently, and I was like, I'm pretty sure it's still out there. Iron Circus is good.
Yeah, they're the ones who helped me publish it after my Kickstarter. It was really difficult for me because I had never done something of that magnitude, and it was taking me a long time. And then Spike from Iron Circus offered to help me, and I was like, oh, thank God, because I didn't know what I was doing.
Uh-oh, you froze up on me.
I'm sorry, my bad.
You're good now.
Okay.
So you were saying Spike helped you?
Yeah. I was really grateful for her offer of assistance when I was taking forever on my Kickstarter rewards.
Yeah, I know Kickstarter is such a great platform, but it
Hmm.
can be also so onerous, especially those first couple projects.
Yeah, it's
I
difficult if you don't have experience with it, and it was such a successful Kickstarter, so I was like, I really got to deliver. But if you tack on all these, what do you call it?
stretch goals.
Yeah, you tack on all these stretch goals, you really hamper yourself because I had a book that was ready to go, and then I was like, oh, and then I'll do this new epilogue, and I'll add these things, and I shouldn't have done any of that, but we did
Lessons
it.
learned, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And now you're on the Patreon model, which honestly is so much more flexible because you
Well,
can.
and it's fun. It's really fun. I've become a patron of several other cartoonists and a couple of podcasts, and I really enjoy the app giving me a notification whenever there's something new because it's all these things that I genuinely love. And when there's a new thing, I want to know about it. It reminds me of back when I used to use Google Reader, which was my favorite thing,
Yep.
and then they took it away. But it's
I
like I've now
never
subscribed to all these things, and I get a notification. I'm like, perfect.
I've never understood the business logic. Well, the business case, whatever makes sense, I guess, because they didn't make money off of it. But Google Reader was my everyday scroll. I mean,
Mine too.
literally, it was what I use Facebook for now is pretty much what I do with Google Reader, and it was better because you didn't have to read all the bullshit you didn't want.
Right.
My favorite Patreon is probably iFanboy, and
Hmm.
it's great because they have built a community inside of it, and that extends to other platforms. So if you're on Facebook, you get access to their Facebook group, and then you can do the hangouts with them. Have you ever? I don't know if you've ever worked or interviewed with any of them. Have you ever been on there?
Who's on iFanboy?
Josh Flanagan.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think I did like a long time ago.
Okay. I think he does a comic book interview series called Talk Explode.
Hmm.
And I think you'd have a really fun conversation. I might reach out and just say, hey, you should have Mayday on because, like, I think he's got a great perspective on comics. He's a cartoonist or not, sorry, he's a writer who's worked with cartoonists and has done a little bit, but is kind of like it's like a sort of a side thing. But
Sure.
I think you'd really enjoy talking to him. He's got a great perspective on process.
Cool.
So another thing I noticed that you had done, and I don't think we talked about this in Comic Book Bear, so this is new, is you did a piece about it's the Merman song from Tori Amos's from the Choir Girl Hotel, which is one of my
Yeah.
favorite Tori Amos albums, with your friend. I'm gonna mess his name
Jason
up.
Horn.
Jason Horn. I was about to say Trevor Horn. I'm like, that's the
Yeah.
wrong Horn. Uh, I haven't seen this yet. I actually want to get a copy of it, find it somewhere. But tell me about what it was like to sort of adapt the visuals of a Tori Amos song.
That was a really cool gig. I had gotten the invite from the editor, Rance Hosley. And at the time, I always did this thing where if I got a gig, that meant I would co-create it with a friend, right? So it was a good way for me and my friends who were all trying to get into comic book gigs to work together and both get a gig, right? So I was asking around with my friends, like, "Hey, I got invited to do this Tori Amos thing. I love Tori Amos. Do you like Tori Amos?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's just okay." And I asked Jason, who's like my best friend, and I said, "Do you like Tori Amos?" And he's like, "Dude, I own this many CDs. This many are Tori Amos, you know." And
That's
I was like,
awesome.
"Well, do you want to write this thing with me?" And he said, "Absolutely." And I said, I was leaning towards because we could pick our song, whatever song we wanted to do, and I think I was leaning towards Merman just because I wanted to draw a merman.
Mm,
And he wrote the story using the lyrics and like made it make sense for as these kind of like illusions of what the lyrics meant. Uh, anyway, it was really a fun project to work on, and I got to design like a cool merman who had like how okay, so like mermaids have like a fin right at the
mhm.
end of their tails. What I wanted to do was have half the fin over here and half the fin over here so they could walk when they were out of the water.
Okay.
But then in the water, they would swim with their legs together. So that's what what I thought was so cool about that project.
Um,
But we got to meet Tori Amos
really?
the year the book released at San Diego, and she was super sweet and had bright orange hair. and it was really, really fun.
What year was that? Do you remember?
I think it was 2009,
Oh wow,
maybe
okay. That,
2010.
I was going to say when I looked on Amazon, which you can still buy the book, but I think
Yeah,
it's like $50. I mean, it's a hardcover. It's a solid, nice.
yeah.
I'm guessing like coffee table size, kind of book. But yeah, it seemed like it had been a while. 'Cause I remember the art, the cover art. I don't know who did it, but it's got this I believe woman with goggles, and then this character with red hair. It's like flailing back. Anyway, it's very iconic. But yeah,
Yeah,
it felt
and
like it was a while ago.
a lot of good people are in that book.
Oh yeah.
I think Mike Mayhack is in it. I know Kelly Sue DeConnick's in it. Neil Gaiman wrote the foreword.
Mark
I was working at a
Buckingham.
bookstore at the time, so when it came out and it was like, in our bookstore, I was working at a Books A Million. I like made it a featured book on the end caps, and I was like, Neil Gaiman wrote the foreword to my new book.
Not to brag or humble.
Not to
humble
brag or anything.
That's not even a humble brag. So I forgot you worked in comics as a retailer.
Yeah.
Do you still go to an LCS or do you just kind of
Yeah, I go to. I've been making a point just as of a few weeks ago. I've been going since I was 12 irregularly to this shop in Athens, Georgia called Bizarro Wuxtry. It's above a record shop, and
cool.
it's a very, very cool shop. I've known the owner of it, Devlin, since I was a kid, and he's still there. My friend Josh works there, and Colette. They have a great squad at that store and a really great back issue section. So a few weeks ago, I was feeling really down about like how limited my contact with other people is during COVID. And my therapist suggested finding something to go do once a week, to go someplace where people know me, where people will say my name. And I realized the only place I could go is my comic shop. So I've been making trips out there and really losing my money because they have great back issues. I've been finding so many good things.
I have not found an LCS since I moved to Seattle, and there are several that are really well recommended. There's one that's not far from me. I need to go. I really need to go, but I will tell you my similar story or my similar place. If I was still in Orlando, would be a comic shop. Aaron Holland.
Aaron Holland's store.
He and my friends Oral and Eric Punzone and gosh, before him, like Mike and all these other people, like from pretty much like the 90s or early 2000s. Like I think I was in college up there. It was like 2003 or 4. I got back into comics because of them.
Wow.
And for I moved this year. It was back in February. So like since then to 2020, I would every Wednesday or sometimes Tuesdays, they do that. And it was like a great epicenter because you had all these nerds and comic book readers and like specifically like nerd like music. They had like all this nerdcore and chiptunes and all these artists come through, and they brought in so many creative I actually got to bring Dan Parent from Archie Comics there to do a meet and greet for when he a little after Kevin Keller had come out, but about that. So it's just having those communities, especially now, is so important. And as long as they're being socially distant and able to make it work. I think the store over here near me, it's like 3 people can be in the store at one time. Is on their sign and always wearing masks, right?
Yeah, Bizarro Wuxtry has a stop sign that says you must wear a mask, and then they've got hand sanitizer right when you walk in to use, so you don't get germs on everything. But there's usually just a couple of people in there at any particular time, and I don't go on Wednesdays because I don't want to run into too many people. But it's really nice to have a comic shop. And it's funny that you mentioned a comic shop because I've never been to that store, but I know Aaron from years and years of hanging out with him at conventions.
Oh yeah.
And talking what would we do if we had control of Robin or Batgirl or that kind of, and he's just like the ideal kind of comic shop guy. I really, it's cool to hear that was your shop.
I think the big thing with his store and him specifically was, and is, I mean, they're still open. I don't want to talk about him in past tense, but he's the ultimate comic fan that became a retailer, and that's not uncommon. but it's sometimes the retailers, I think they get a little older, and even if they can still talk like this, they've kind of like they've done enough. They've kind of had their fill. It's like, like I'm just saying, because I've been to a few other stores, and this is the thing. There's a guy in Rhode Island, and he kind of falls in a different group in Newport, Annex Comics, kind of that older. He's did his time, and now he's like, I just want to talk about weird stuff, like good, interesting, artistically valid, weird stuff, and that's great. But I love the comic shop owner that you can come in and you can be like, hey, I'm really into Batman, or hey, I'm really into, I want something different. Show me, tell me what's going on, and they can talk. All of his people, it's consistently, they all can talk comics, both current, past. They know what they recommend. It's that's the experience you want. You want it to be you want it to be inviting in, not exclusionary, like anything else, right?
That's what I miss the most about running a shop is just somebody comes in and they tell you something they like, and you know they're going to love the next thing you show them because they've already told you, I like this writer. And it's like, well, have you read this that they did? No, you haven't. Like having that knowledge and using it was so fun. And making a place welcoming and bright and inviting, which a lot of comic shops from my youth were not. That's one of the reasons why I like highlighting Bizarro Wuxtry, because they're just gorgeous. Their shop looks so good right now.
If I ever get a chance to get to Athens, not only am I going to have to call you up and be like, hey, I'm here. Post-COVID world, we can actually have coffee or something.
You should come out for Fluke some year.
Yeah, you mentioned Flukes. That's the local show?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a local show, but a lot of people from Atlanta and SCAD come up.
Oh, okay.
So it's been going for years and years and years. Robert Newsom and Patrick Dean put it on.
I think one of those names is familiar. Maybe I met him at Heroes. Small Press Expo is the one that my East Coast friends are like, you got to go to Small Press Expo. Yeah. It's the best. It's so amazing. Because I do kind of feel like after doing Heroes a lot, pretty consistently, like you, every year, and I like the smaller shows. Emerald City here in Seattle, is that? I think it's the Seattle one. I get the impression is a little bigger, but
it's a big show.
Still has the spirit of that kind of a show.
I haven't been there since Reed Pop bought them, not on purpose. I just haven't had the chance to be out there, but. I really love my memories of that show. I sat next to J.H. Williams 3 one year, and he did a little Batwoman sketch for me. He was a super tough motorcycle looking guy with metal shirts, and then he was a sweetheart. I loved him. He was great.
He is a teddy bear. I ran into him at Moogfest in Asheville, and I didn't even it took me a second, and I'm like, wait a minute. And he was super sweet, and
it's
again,
the most talented dude.
Oh my gosh,
he can do anybody's art style. I can't fathom how you could possibly do that.
There's another artist who does a lot of Marvel stuff who's like that, and my brain is addled from not talking comics long enough in a while. Anyway, it'll come to me. Husband.
You know
and wife.
Who else can do that is Joe Quinones.
Yes.
On that Dial H for Hero book where he does different styles.
That was with Bendis, right? Did he do it with Bendis or someone else?
Sam Humphries wrote that.
Oh, it was when Sam. Okay, yeah. Okay.
I might be wrong about that.
I know. Well, Bendis was on it before Humphries, I think. But anyway, I do want to go back to your stuff. As much as I love talking comics,
I could talk comics,
which honestly we should do more often. We need to have you back on Comic Bears or Flame On as a comics industry insider panel or something.
I'm more of a comics industry outsider, but I like that idea.
You're you know a lot of the people because as we're going to talk about with this next thing that you've done, Project Rooftop.
Right.
You've worked with a lot of artists who are now kind of up and coming. Of course, James Figueredo for the win here. Stuart Eminem is who I was thinking of.
Stuart is a definite contender.
But with Project Rooftop, you've worked and you created a space for cartoonists to get to reinvent superheroes. And I remember this coming up in, I think, a panel you did at Heroes one year with Erica
Anderson
and some other, I forgot who else was on that panel, but you really did do a lot of great work to bring people out of their woodwork and get to show their designs.
Well, I appreciate that. I love that site. It's kind of defunct now just because I've kind of moved on to other interests. But it's like how I made friends in comics, you know? It's like you'd say we're doing a Batgirl contest, and then you'd meet all these talented kids, and some of them would go on to be superstars. Joe Quinones and Ming Doyle and Chris Anka and Jamie McKelvey and even Stuart Eminem he was already a superstar, but he did one of our earliest redesigns back in 2006. It was a really cool site as a nexus point for so many creators.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of them give you credit for kind of facilitating that environment and letting people have this place to share their designs. And I think their design work, not only did it get them attention, obviously, but it also really gave some influence into the redesigns of other characters down the road. I mean, they wouldn't just take that design, but I think it led some people in the industry to really.
I definitely think there's been a shift in perception for costume design, and I don't, me personally, say that's mine. That's what I did, but I definitely think all of us working together to redesign superheroes and make them fun and interesting made it a more common thing to change up costumes. Because I mean, if you look at comics before we did that. Like Supergirl had like 5 costumes, and now she's had like 20 since then, so there's more freedom to change things up and see if, I don't know. I think it's cool that characters can have lots of different costumes.
I love it. And I think it's both a good way to reinvigorate a property, but I think it's a good way to like show, especially in the everything's being adapted into TV or movies, to show other options and possibilities. Because like I remember the X-Men movie, I believe Grant Morrison. Did Morrison's new X-Men come out before or after the X-Men?
After the X-Men movies.
So the movies in that case, I think, might have kind of pushed. Not Morrison as much as
Quietly,
yeah, Frank.
But I think Grant designed the costumes.
Oh, did he? Okay, well,
yeah.
Even
if
more.
You've seen he does all these sketchbooks. He draws out a lot of the design stuff and then quietly makes it gorgeous.
From Quietly. Oh, jeez. Someday we'll get more Frank Quietly art.
Yeah.
Every time I think he puts out anything, all of the not fanboys, all of his fans and devotees and people who've taken his style even and made it sort of like adapted and made their own, like they're all just like salivating. I meant to tell you earlier, I don't know if I showed you this before, but one of my favorite Morrison projects was Multiversity.
Yeah, me too.
So I have this page that's got the who's the guy? What was it? Oh, Paulo Seguerda. Seguerda. And it's the New Gods, and I don't know. It's probably not coming over very well, but I mean, like, I just absolutely adore a lot of Morrison's choice in artists. Like, almost without exception, he's worked with some of the best. It's like Bendis; they really find the artists that fit so tightly, and then I think both of them sort of adapt their work. Their writing to fit that artist too. So.
Well, that's something I know. You're talking to a real Morrison fanboy right now, and the thing about Morrison is he'll go back and change dialogue based on the artwork, and he'll take out captions that are unnecessary because the art covers it. He just does interesting stuff to make sure his art goes with or his writing goes with the art.
Have you been enjoying his Green Lantern series?
I have all of it, but I haven't read it.
I think that I like some aspects of it, and it's somewhat more straightforward than some of his stuff.
Sure.
But I do think that it's hard at times, because when you think about Grant Morrison's DC epic that he has been telling over gosh, probably approaching 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
From actually more than 20, from Animal Man all the way through to what he's doing now.
Yeah.
It's an odd way to end and to kind of leave DC, which is, I mean, he's basically said he's done, with DC and all this stuff because he's doing television and doing other things. But I'm interested. We should talk. We should talk about this once you've read it, and maybe once it's done, we'll do a little.
Yeah.
Special
Well, the only hesitancy I have on it is that I'm not a big Hal Jordan person.
Oh.
Like, I like Hal Jordan, but I was a 90s kid, so like Kyle Rayner was my guy.
Yeah.
And I already had Morrison writing Kyle Rayner in the JLA as the best Green Lantern,
Yeah, I know what you're saying. But it's funny because like Final Crisis in some ways is sort of a love letter to the Green Lanterns.
Yeah.
So he's always wanted to do this and tried to find ways to fit it in, but it's kind of one of those things where be careful you meet your heroes. And I mean, I've never gotten a chance to meet Grant Morrison, but I think this is him meeting his hero, Hal Jordan, and it's maybe not the most successful. But we're going to talk about that, I think, when you get.
I tell you, I've met Grant Morrison a couple of times.
Oh yeah,
and he's just such a nerd, and I love it. Like, he's just like this. Like, just he's geeked out, excited about superheroes. But I met him after I did something terrible, and I wondered if he had read it, and he told me I did a good job on it.
Oh,
that's right? Amazing. My favorite guy. There's little, like, Easter eggs about Grant Morrison. In fact, Grant Morrison is in You'll Be Safe Here, the poster.
I need to go back and look. I didn't notice that.
I don't have it right here.
It's in my. I haven't put it up yet. I got to find a perfect spot for it, but
yeah,
I'm gonna go look for it after this is done because I got to see this. This is great.
He's very very small.
No, that's fun. It's a big poster. I do want to touch on. We don't have too much time left, but I do want to touch on another a project you're working on that you're gonna have a home for. I believe. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. So I'm gonna pull up your website here. So talk to me about some of these heroes that you've got. I believe they're sort of like. Is this the one that's sort of forming like a team of?
No,
kids?
So that one was from that one's called The Pilot, and it was in an anthology of positive stories about the future that I did. But if you'll
scroll down a little bit,
I don't know if you scroll all the way down, I think there's some butterfly panels. Yeah, there's 2 butterfly pages. But Butterfly is this superhero that I made up back in 2005, I want to say. And he's a sidekick of a sidekick, little boy who can fly and has kind of Superman-like powers, but doesn't want to hurt anybody. So they're a butterfly. And at the time, he was a sidekick of a sidekick. So I thought, if Batman has a sidekick and it's a bird, if a bird had a sidekick, it would be a butterfly. And, well, now if you click over to the covers panel or page.
I got you. Hold on a sec. Covers,
I can show you. I've kind of redesigned their costume.
Is it?
Yeah, scroll down a little bit more. Oh, it might not be on this page. It might be on another one, or maybe it's on the art page. I'm sorry to be moving you around.
No, it's my
so
fault.
much.
I should have had this better planned out.
Okay, see those kids all together?
There they are.
Yeah,
right here.
So those are Butterfly's new team that I've been working on for years and years and years, because all the characters me and my son came up with, starting when he was 3, we started making up new superheroes to be friends with Butterfly.
Aww.
And Emmett is 11 now, and we're doing a little short story where a new team member joins, and you get to introduce to all the kids who are on the team already. And it's kind of about learning to find your place in the world.
That is so sweet that you're developing this, or you've developed this with your son. That has got to be probably one of the more amazing experiences to have as an adult.
It really is. If you make comics, and then, I remember Emmett was 3, and he said, I want to make up a superhero. And I was like, okay, what should he be like? And he's like, he's from the sun and he has all the animal powers. and so that yellow kid in the,
right here. Yep. Let's see if I can.
He's with the red shirt.
Oh, no. How about?
Yeah.
Wait.
With the bird wing, that's Super Beast. He's from the sun and he has all the animal powers.
No way.
Yeah, his symbol's an 8 because it takes light. It's a S and an 8 and an infinity all at once because it takes light 8 minutes to get from the sun to the earth.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh. Like seriously, children and Jack Kirby like make the best superheroes, right?
For
Like,
sure.
I mean, it's like crazy because it's simplicity and it's like kind of obvious, but like adults get their minds all cloudy and adult and then they can't think straight and do something cool like this.
Well, I
right?
think I benefit from having too much Grant Morrison in my head. So
Right? Oh, well,
you say something like from the sun and has animal powers. I go, yeah, sure.
of course, right. No, and I think you'll appreciate that in this new Green Lantern stuff too, because Morrison's got a lot of interesting lanterns and other creatures that he's come up with. So
Cool.
so yeah, I what else is next? I know Hallows is ongoing. You're putting out pages what, like weekly-ish, or
Yeah.
is it kind of okay? Oh, and there's one more I want to show. If this is okay, there's a beautiful not sketch, a beautiful painting, or brain's not addled here. It also didn't help. I had a lovely beer this afternoon. I'm going to show one page from Patreon just so you can
Sure.
kind of get an idea what you're missing if you're not a patron. I love this very Halloween edition of Moonshine with the pumpkin. It's perfect.
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely wanted to do a Halloween fall picture.
And again, with Patreon, just as a tease, you can see down here, you can see your blue lines and is this the ink or is this okay? So like again, if you're a process nerd, if you're a comics fan and like that excites you, you're gonna eat all this stuff up. It's so cool to see it come together. I want to make sure I also include our buddy James here. He had a great compliment for you. Found out about you because of your Project Rooftop.
Thanks so much, James.
So that's really it's always neat to see how people find you in the world, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So anything else coming up besides like I was talking about that sort of story that's gonna find a home here soon for the young superheroes and Hallows? Anything else that you want to plug or talk about?
Not with me. I'm in the meantime going back to school to get my master's in elementary education.
So noble. Oh my gosh. Especially now with everything going on, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of opportunities for passionate educators.
Well, I spent last year working in an elementary school and I realized that I needed to hang out with people on my level like that. Kids who like Legos.
Oh my gosh. Can I tell you real quick? Have you seen the Lego light up kits that you can buy to add on to your Lego sets?
Yes, I have. I've seen a lot of them.
Deadly, and oh my god, talk about a money pit. Like Legos are bad enough.
Yeah.
I had to make a choice. I sold off most of my comics before I moved, but I didn't sell off my Legos.
Nice.
And so now that I know these exist, oh my god, it's dangerous.
For sure.
But Mayday, thank you so much for joining us. I really love talking to you. It's always a pleasure. I really hope people will go check out. I'll put a link. Actually, we put a link on the video post for this to your Patreon and your website. But if you don't have that accessible when you're watching this, just Google Patreon and Mayday and Hallows, and I think you're going to find it right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. I really love talking to you too.
Awesome. Well, until you finish Green Lantern and we have this conversation that we're going to have,
absolutely.
Take care of yourself and please be safe. In a week or so, hopefully everything is quiet and uneventful.
Yes, let's have a good uneventful week.
Right? It'd be lovely for a change. Thanks again. Take care of yourself.
Bye.